Welcome, everyone, to the Cincinnati School Board's committee on budget, finance, and growth. And we have a crowded agenda, as always, and a number of people here. And also, we're in a different room than we've been doing some of our committee meetings. So you're on the right station, so to speak. My name is Eve Bolton, and if my committee members will introduce themselves.
Mike Morosky.
Brandon Craig.
And we also have our president of the board here.
Hello.
His name is Ben Lindy.
Thanks, Eve.
So, welcome everyone. We have too many people to introduce, but we do appreciate the folks being here. As we do on a monthly basis in the interest of good stewardship and the fine work that the Treasurer's Office and staff does, we'll start right away with financial reports and CRAs, and if you'll introduce as we need to, that would be great. Treasurer Wagner.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I think first up is Kevin Ashley, and behind him will be Taya, and then.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you all today?
Great.
Good. So I think you would have received this in your packet. Well, Rob, I'll just get back to slide 4. Oh, it's the monthly financial draft. As we've done recently, the second page kind of outlines just the highlights. But then I'll just kind of briefly go through some of the slides since I know there's a lot on the agenda today.
Great, thank you, sir.
Yes. The slide number 4 actually has the cash balances in comparison to this fiscal year to date compared to the prior 2 years. At this point, they're up a little bit, and kind of looking in, to that. Our net revenues are down, but we've had a healthier cash balance related to the carryover from the prior year. So that's one reason our cash balances are sitting where they are.
That is correct. The revenues that are down, they're down because.
Let me get to that.
Okay.
Yes.
Related to a lot of things, really, but timing, the deductions from state foundation. So there's several things. I'll go through that a little bit more in detail when I get to the later slides. The next page is revenue. So one of the things we added here too is the light blue category. It's just estimating what that pass-through funding from ODE represented in the prior years. Because obviously we're not getting that this year as part of the change in the state funding. We no longer get the money for those students that are then educated at community school and through those scholarship programs. So those expenses are down, and then also our revenues are down. So just trying to capture that so that it's more comparable from year to year. The next one actually breaks it down a little bit further in terms of categories. Next slide, please. So the green represents the state foundation. And as you can see, the third column represents the current fiscal year. And it is down, but again, we're not getting that receipts for those students who are then educated at community schools. Those are going directly to them. So that's the big explanation between the green. The blue, you'll see the tax revenue is up. Overall, our tax revenues are up this year based on the triennial update that was recently done and other things. But part of this difference is also timing related to public utilities and when that is posted and when that's being posted. We have received our final settlement in the middle of March. So now it'll just be a few little things that will come in to make that number change. But you can see it in the final column is the budget. So we're actually running just a little bit ahead of where we had budgeted taxes to be for this year. Next slide is a comparison of expenditures. Again, the light blue represents the actual deductions that were made in the prior years. Our expenditures Otherwise, for this year, are higher. Again, a multitude of things that go in there. Tuition expenses up about $10 million. Fuel charges are up, which is probably not a big surprise. Lease purchase contracts based on timing and such are up as well. And again, salary and benefits related to collective bargaining agreement. The next slide is where we're just doing a comparison to see where we are as far as the unallocated budget. The blue represents actual, the dark blue represents encumbrances. The green items are what we've set aside for salary and benefits or transfers. So the remaining 34 at this point is not encumbered, but perhaps is planned. So one of the things we will do internally is do a further breakdown of that by department or budget unit. Go 2 slides will be the schoolwide pool. Again, expenditures in terms of dollars are higher. Our budget was higher this year in part due to salary and benefits, again, through collective bargaining, which is the main piece of schoolwide pool. Next slide. Again, we're just showing this unallocated budget for the schoolwide pool. All right, and then just a couple slides on the preschool expansion. This slide captures the calculations for tuition assistance. During the month of March, 880 students were identified to receive assistance through this. And it was calculated at $600,000. The fiscal year to date total is $4.2 million. Again, serving currently 880 students. Also compared those prior years, obviously with COVID last year, it was only 601. The year before was about 842. So a little bit additional over that time period as well. And then at that point, they were serving 1,925 total students through preschool. The next slide shows the middle column is the actual revenues and expenditures. Compared to the year before, you'll see they're pretty comparable. United Way contributions are down a little bit this year, part of that offset of the carryover. And I think that's all I have.
Do any members have any questions for Kevin? Are we anticipating any kind of, you mentioned we were fortunate to have the carryover that we had from the previous year. Does it look like we're going to have a healthy or less healthy kind of carryover? I'm sure it's too early to tell anything, but what are your thoughts?
So we have a cash balance carryover every year,
Right.
right? And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we have at least 45 days of operating, 45 to 60 days of operating funds at the beginning of each year. So I don't anticipate it being significantly different than it is now. We are the one pie chart that shows the amount of money that's committed to salaries is underspent because of all the vacancies that we've had. And so I anticipate finishing the year with a higher cash balance than we had the prior year. But with that'll, when we finish the forecast, it'll become a little bit more apparent. We'll estimate like how we're going to revise for the end of the year expenses for next year.
And the vacancy issue is we have a lot of vacancies because
Hard to fill positions.
like the rest of the world.
Yes. Although, interesting fact, up at the OASBO conference on the economic session and economic outlook session, they talked about the K-12 industry not being hit as hard because we have a barrier to exit. If people that are committed into the retirement system are less likely to leave and quit. And so they were talking about just overall economics. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up is Taya Bondi. She's our manager of state and federal grants, and she is going to present data.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
So I will be sharing information about our state and federal grants. There is a spreadsheet summary. Yes, there it is. So this is the summary of the year-to-date percent spent for all of our individual federal and state grants. So we are 60% through the grant cycle, and we have 35 public grants. So there's 3 sections to this spreadsheet. There's the public section, and there's 35 grants, 74 million. And then there's an ESSER section that represents 8 grants, and our ESSER funding is 327 million. And then we have a non-public section, which is a total of 9 grants, and that budget is 21 million. And so then we have some charts on the spending. So we have, this is a representation of the monthly year-to-date spend, and it's comparing the current year to the prior year. So the blue represents the prior year of 21, and then the green represents the current year of 22. So for March, we're at 40%, and that's where we were last year. The difference is we do have $4 million in additional funding this year that we did not have last year, but the monthly spend is pretty steady for the month of March. And then we have a graph of the ESSER spending. So the blue graphs represent the total ESSER funding. So for fiscal year, the 4-year budget is 327 million, the first blue graph there, the first blue box there. And of that 327 million, we've spent 110 million. And that's, again, the accumulation of all the years of our grants funding. And then the green box focuses on, I keep saying box, graphs, bar charts. The green focuses on the current year. So the fiscal year 22 budget is 130 million. And of that 130 million, we have spent or encumbered 89 million. And
So just to remind everybody that each grant has a different ending year. So ESSER 1 ends September 23, and 2 and 3 end in September 24, correct?
Correct.
Those are all multi-year grants.
Any questions on the state and federal grants?
Members, just have one, if I could. So for the ESSER amounts of money that we have, how much money is available from ESSER for fiscal year 23?
We're, off the top of my head, I don't remember, but we're in the process of revising the 3-year plan because there are areas in this year that are consistently being underspent. And so we are revising so that for this year, we had line items that we carried through for the 3-year budget, but they're being underspent this year. So we're trying to determine whether we need to, is it a timing issue? We need to put that money into next year, or do we need to revise that downward for the 3 years to free up money for something else? And so that's all changing, and that'll be presented soon.
Just to follow up, what are the several things we're allowed to spend ESSER money on?
So ESSER 3 is about continuity of operation and in response to reducing learning loss in response to the coronavirus in general. But
Chair Bolton, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Treasurer Wagner and team, this is really very helpful and I appreciate it. This may have been something that you just shared. I was just trying to make sure I track the numbers correctly. The biggest chunk of the ESSER dollars is that third ESSER allocation.
that was 305 million, I
And
think.
of the total years we have to spend it, what percent of the way through that runway are we?
Of the third.
Are we a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, halfway through?
I would say less than
We're less than a third of the way through.
Because next year is when the biggest facility things are going to hit. Hyde Park, Pleasant Ridge, and then Walnut Hills of the 13.5 million of the Walnut Hills expansion. Those 3 projects alone start in 23 and finish in 24. So I'd say we're less than a third of the way through ESSER 3
Absolutely, yes.
off the top of my head.
Okay. And so we're a little less than a third of the way through the time we have to spend the money. And then about what share of the money have we either spent or encumbered?
It's all in this graph here. So you want a percent?
No. I think that what's behind my question is, are we going to wind up in a situation in a year and a half where we have a ton of unspent money?
No.
Can you talk just a little bit about why we shouldn't be worried about it?
Because right now, the general fund budget right now is for next year has a challenge, right? So we haven't balanced it yet. And so we're looking at revising the ESSER plan to see how we can help with the continuity of operations to balance the general fund budget, or need them with dollars available over the 3-year period.
Great. So what I'm hearing is we shouldn't worry about a world where we can't make the very best use of the federal dollars that we receive because we're not spending it fast enough.
My answer is very confidently that's correct.
Great.
We're way ahead of other school districts in our spending, so we are good.
Thank you very much.
I would add we're way ahead of the city that has been sitting on money and the county that has a significant amount of money that they've been sitting on and are looking for ways to spend it compared to where we are in the whole CLIF plan. But what I'm most excited about to the point is the revision of the CLIF plan, because we're in a very different place now than where we were when all of this began. So I appreciate the long-term planning as well as the long-term flexibility.
Yes.
I think that's great. So that's good. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my favorite chart.
Ms. Hughes, no CRAs this time? Okay.
Oh, you left out.
Next month.
I'll bet. They'll make up for it. We've had a change in administration and probably they've been through a transition as well. So makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda is a presentation by our QI team that we developed 2 years ago, I think, regarding position management and controlling our human capital data in the budget. And so I'm going to introduce to you Aaron and Brandon, and then they're going to introduce like the rest of the team members. That some are here and some aren't. But Brandon Alexander is our new manager of position management. So that was in response to this problem solving project. And you all know we love Aaron as our QI expert who guides us, and we could not do this without her. So Brandon, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So I'm here to talk about a little bit about our position management quality improvement project. As Jen mentioned, it has lasted for a couple of years and is a very much a collaborative cross-department effort. If you go to the next slide, the team members involved. This is our current team. There have been others over the course of the years that we've been working on it. Aaron Kernahan, and then from the Treasurer's Office, Treasurer Wagner, Mike Guston, myself. I've now been on the team in 2 roles, originally as Budget Supervisor, now as the Position Control Manager. Nan Haygood, Lisa Bryant, Taya Grangbandai, and Kim Hughes. And then from our Talent Acquisition and Staffing team, Ross Cherpo, Anthony Williams, Sonika Moog, and Thomas Connolly. Again, big props to all of them. This has been a very collaborative effort between us. So the goals that we set about for this project, and they as well have changed. We are on our 16th version of our KDD document. Initially was to reduce our negative vacancies for the fiscal year 21 from 190 to 10 by February 1st of 2021. Now, what a negative vacancy is, a negative vacancy, to put simply, is a position that's over budget. We have too many people in a position, more people than we had budgeted for. A lot of reasons that can happen. Someone has extended their leave, so their long-term sub their position was ending and now needs to continue forward. positions where there's a lot of movement or turnaround. Someone's going to be leaving a position, so we get somebody in ahead of time if we can so that they can learn. Lots of different reasons that those negative vacancies exist, but what they are is uncontrolled spending because we weren't intending or budgeted to spend at that level. We were able to reach below 10 negative vacancies during that school year, but only at the very end. And during a school year spending, we reached that goal in January 24th of this year. Our most recent goal, again, was to reduce negative vacancies from 106 to 2. Our goal was 2 this time. And that was by April 24th of this year. We did manage to reach below 2 on February 28th and got our median line down to 1.25 ahead of that April 24th goal just a couple of weeks ago. This is the image of our KDD document as it is now. Again, it has our aim on there to get below by the 24th. All of our different key drivers and many of our different interventions that we've implemented here on the right. Some of those interventions include establishment of this position that I'm in now, the position of control manager. What was biweekly meetings to address the over budget positions is now daily check-in and communication and huddle as needed. Some of the other interventions that we've had, the implementation of a budget block so that we couldn't put someone into a position at first just by their position number if it would put it over budget. Then over the course that evolved into budget block 2.0, where we couldn't put someone into a position specifically by the funding source, by the FQA, if that specific FQA would be over budget, so that we wouldn't have one position with one funding source overloaded versus the others. I'm going to the next one. This is our run chart for the course of the 2 years. The peaks at the very beginning and in the middle are primarily related to the new school year or to when we have made changes in positions from the teacher allocation committee, the TAC meetings. Those are both times where we're shifting teachers around or positions around, and we end up with a lot of people in places that we didn't intend to. And as you can see, in the last few weeks here, we've gotten down below our goal line, which is that green line all the way at the bottom. Some of the other implementations you'll see, budget block at the beginning. When I started, that's my little image there in the middle. And when we got to the end and were able to do daily communication and huddles to really hone in on any of the positions that were over budget, why that happened, and what we needed to do to get that resolved.
So just one little comment here. Putting Brandon in that position did not create a new position. We repurposed and promoted. So we did not add human resources to the problem. We just reshifted responsibilities and accountability.
Why is this important? On average, one of those negative vacancies from that last chart has an annual cost of $57,075. So at our peak during that run chart, we had 256 FTEs worth of negative vacancies. So should those positions have remained that way for an entire year, that would be total spending of $14,586,000, which is either overspent, misapplied, or certainly spent without intention, which is obviously what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to spend with intention. So whether someone's in the incorrect position or the position is over budget, resolving that, it will save a lot of funding being misspent. Some of the things we learned the importance of tracking new negative vacancies. As you could tell from those run charts, there were lots of times where you're driving that number down. But what we realized is if we worked towards and resolved 30 negative vacancies in a week, but the number only went down by 20 because 10 new negative vacancies had been created elsewhere. And that was something we were able to learn when we had resolved a significant number of them. We got down to a more reasonable number, and we were looking at, okay, these are the ones being created. That allowed us to look more into the why solution so that we don't end up in the same situation that we were in. some process and automated improvements to prevent the creation of more negative vacancies. Again, that speaks to Budget Block and Budget Block 2.0, as well as to what happens when the HR technicians who are putting people into positions, when they see that it is over budget, they get a status or a warning, and that the procedure that they follow when that happens. And the value of individual ownership of the process rather than a very distributed responsibility, particularly considering how many people are on our team. Having the responsibility in one person's hands has definitely helped us bring that number down. Opportunities to take what we've learned and apply it in the future. A few coming up. The new positions via the position request form is always ongoing. Requests for new positions, whether they are brand new or whether they are long-term subs, and improving that process as we go. The active fiscal year 23 budget process and planning that you guys are certainly very familiar with. Again, is an opportunity to make sure that we don't receive a huge batch, and we have lots of plans as far as data review to make sure that we don't end up in a place where people are in the wrong position. And then following that, the next teacher allocation committee or TAC meetings, and getting those changes processed all across the board so that we don't have, again, people out of place.
So Brandon, out of the 256 negative vacancies, how many positions do we manage in a year? Yeah.
I don't. Do you how many average negative vacancy over the course of a year?
No, we have about 6,200 FTEs
totally,
that we
yes.
manage.
Oh, absolutely.
So just trying to get you guys to understand the scope of what it does.
Yes, that was on the chart as well. That is about 6,300 FTEs worth that we have currently. This is an example of a chart we've used recently to talk about the things that we've learned. Part of the things on here I like to include is because we have all of the different names for people who have made the comments, things that we can improve, potential obstacles that we'll see going forward, and the things that we've learned that can be applied in other areas. And I think that there is a lot there.
Especially what will happen if Brandon wins the lottery and walks away from us? Can we sustain this motion? So, anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do. Does anybody, members, have some comments before I start? Go ahead.
This is really impressive. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Those numbers are shocking to me to think about, like, if somebody wasn't on top of this, what kind of money would just be being spent for essentially no reason. So just one more reason to get the word out, I think, about our financial procedures. So I appreciate it. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have kind of two questions. And so the first one is, in noticing on the one chart at the beginning of each school year, we kind of run into the same issue with regards to having these excess positions. Is there any thought being done to how do we minimize that start of the year number?
Absolutely. There's quite a bit of thinking there. And one of the things that we've implemented is new budget software that has the capability of having the individual employee names rather than just focusing on how many positions we have, which will allow us to reconcile that a lot better as we go into next year.
Okay. And then the other question I had was really around this idea of rethinking some positions as well. And so in some ways, sometimes what we have is we have these excess of people in positions because they're doing different things for different reasons that we could maybe siphon out some of that work elsewhere. And so how do you have the conversation with other places that are not your office about how do we do this better? How do we do this more efficiently?
So those are the conversations we're having. The new superintendent and I are starting those conversations, and with her direct reports about envisioning different ways of doing things. So those conversations are happening. Yeah.
Well, I think this is to Mike's point as well. This is great information to have. This is great that you all are keeping that dedicated eye on it. And I think the better we can become at being efficient at both reviewing whether or not we have excessive number of folks in positions that are not needed or not in the right space, but then also how do we prepare for the future and keep thinking about the future?
Right. So just to add a little bit of commentary to your first question about the beginning of the year bubble. So we would build a budget in one software and everybody would make changes in the budget software, but then the operational software would roll over from one year to year. And we realized that we need to have significant reconciliation before we do that. Because people change, they change roles, they change positions, they change funding sources. And so that was, and that it wasn't that everybody didn't care about it, it was because it was managed by two different departments. And so as we merge it under Brandon, that's the cross communication that happens every day. So, good job. So Aaron, do you want to make any comments about the team or the process? And
Lost for words. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Erin Kernahan. I'm the Quality Improvement Manager for CPS. And if you would ask me to summarize what made this possible in 2 words, I would say commitment and collaboration. The dedication to change ideas, the willingness to have that open mind and be reflective, and being part of this team and witnessing every 2 weeks. We huddle every other week. A true huddle is 30 minutes. Typically, we're an hour, but we're okay with that. And then the cross collaboration, going across departments, learning from everyone in the process is key to seeing not only that initial success, but sustainability. And ultimately, that's the goal.
Jen, I don't think this was shared, but I might have missed it. Is there a dollar figure for how much this has saved Cincinnati Public Schools?
Yeah, so it was on one of his slides. It was between 14 and 15 million.
I mean,
annualized.
That just is a lot of money. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate.
Yeah.
I mean, this feels like it would have been great even if the number were less than 14 or 15 million. But the fact that it's 14 million is also extraordinary. I just want to echo everybody's thanks and appreciation. I think it's inspiring and a big deal.
So our philosophy is that for every dollar we can save through a QI project is that dollar I can put back into the class. So to support students.
Or not spend.
Or not spend, yeah. Financial stewardship. So,
That's right.
Mike and Kim, you're on the team. Do you guys want, either one of you guys want
Big Mike.
to?
He's going to say
He's
something.
going to say something. Okay, good.
Yeah, Big Mike. He didn't get a chance to talk at Monday night.
You did a great job on Monday.
Fantastic.
Oh, so
Great
he got chased down in the
placeholder.
parking lot because a reporter thought he was Ben Lynn.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty
We're often confused for one another.
Yeah, we're
Aren't
pretty
you
much the
glad
same
I
person.
introduced you?
No, I just want to say this has been a great team. I just completed the Impact U with Cincinnati Children's. And this team really kind of was my first introduction to the whole QI thing. And Erin's taught us so much. And I really just want to praise her for, guiding us. Sometimes I think we kind of felt we were lost and getting her back. Jen's done a great job of keeping us on track and yelling at us when needed, and screaming at us when needed to get kind of things focused. But it's really worked well, and it's been a good chance to watch people grow. I've watched Brandon grow. I've watched some of our talent partners grow into it. So just really proud of everyone's work.
Great.
I'm super proud of the team.
That's great. This has been good news and good work, and representing stay right there, Kim. My question is how it impacts then this coming budget planning about those vacancies. If you're not carrying them forward.
So there weren't
or how does
vacancies.
They were
Negative, they're over
yes,
budget, right?
over budget.
So this is, gives us a better ability to manage
Great.
in a frugal way.
I know that was impacting what we were saying was the total and really, and we know that the board's been very concerned about the explosion of positions. And some of those are real and some of them may not have been. So, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So what I would like to say is I really do appreciate having had this experience. What it has taught me is how much there is a true dependency. Just the ability to be able to come out of our isolated spaces and come together and work collaboratively. I believe this team was the epitome of that. And I just want to applaud everyone that's been on the team, and especially to our favorite QI person, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Great. What a model for the future. That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you all.
Domorowski.
I just want to say real quick, having worked at Children's, I know how difficult that Impact U is. So congrats to Mike. I don't know if you all know how grueling that is, but doing that with a full-time job is real hard. So kudos, Mike. Appreciate it.
I've asked for like 5 more seats for next year because I want to keep the more people I can get trained on that floor, the better I will be.
All right, we're going to move ahead if we can. Jen, you want to give us the update on the budget and also particularly the community gathering dates?
Sure. Rob, you want to bring up mine? So Superintendent Wright and I have been spending a lot of time together virtually over meeting with the PLT members and their budgets and their priorities. All the draft budgets, sorry, I'm ahead of you. Got these new templates out there, PowerPoint I like. Anyway, all the draft budgets have now been loaded into our new software. It's called AllaView. And so we are going through and analyzing to make sure there aren't nothing's missing or any duplicates, and we found a few, and so we're working through those issues. We also, if you just flip to the next slide real quick, started this new financial impact tool that I actually stole from President Lindy in the class that he was taking, and so modified it for our use. But what we had everybody do last week was put in all their major projects, their strategic initiatives, and any new or old project, the cost of that project, who is serving, either as number of students or number of employees, and then a cost per FTE, what's the desired outcome, and it has to be a numeric measure, like an X to Y statement, or, like I'm increasing attendance or decreasing discipline. And then we'll put a place in there for a current measure so we can track progress. They had to identify what's the risk, and then what the funding source is, because a lot of times we focus just on general fund projects, but we have projects that are multi-grant funded, and we need to understand what's the total cost of ownership. And so we're working through that. We went through the first pass of that, so you can flip back one more, with this week, and then we have follow-up meetings next week. Ironette and I created a whole list of questions to challenge people's thinking. This is a really good first step for everybody. We didn't get as far as I would have liked to gotten on the whole ROI concepts. People aren't used to thinking in those terms. But the plan is, after next week's pass, we'll be able to present that document at a high level when we presented how we decided to, or how we came up with a balanced budget. So we're using, one of the requirements for the board, and the goal was to use a process to make our decisions that's analytical, and this is how we're doing it. We're also working on the 3-year plan, as I mentioned earlier, revising based on the current year activities and how that might play out in the next 3 years, what new requests are coming up, and then we'll present that back to the board for adoption. The next, go to that one. There you go. You read my mind. So this was a slide from the last time I presented in public. Next Wednesday is the district-wide LSDMC meeting on the 20th, so we'll give them an update. And then we're going to have 2 town halls. In talking to Krista and Superintendent Wright, I think the format of the first one will be about, these are all of our revenue sources, just trying to educate the public. And then the second one will be, this is how we spend all those resources and invest them in our students. And I want to do it more of a kind of a Q&A presentation rather than me standing up going through 60 slides. And so we're working on that format. Cohere is going to facilitate them for us. And then we'll let the public either send chats in, questions, or answer them on the fly as we go forward. But that's status right now. I think next week when we get through the second version of the final impact tool, we can then reestablish like which board meetings we'll come to and give updates to. Because she said it won't start until May 2nd. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I go last. I'm the.
Go do it now.
You're okay. Jen, you answered one of them about town halls that people, it'll be physically here at the Ed Center, but people can also join by Blue Jeans.
Yes. or something, yes.
No pressure. I
think-
what's behind my question is I want to help advertise, and I just want to make sure
Whatever-
I'm telling people the right thing.
Yes, it's intended to be very public participatory.
Okay. Okay.
You got it?
I had, and then on the impact tool, can you go back one to the financial impact score?
Yep, just one, yep, there you go.
The version I was familiar with put everything in per student terms,
Yes,
like expenses per impacted kid.
yes, that's
Um,
the third column.
I not okay.
It's either, because not everything is spent on kids, some things that are spent on adults, like professional development, for example. So we want to know what's the cost per employee and how is that impacting, what's the growth measure?
I think if it's PD, it ought to be PD, right? That is about like being a better teacher.
Or being a better accountant?
Or my thought is that it all should trickle down to kids. Like, isn't there a way of, like, if it hits the whole district, then the denominator would be 36,000 kids. Like, is there a, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, so philosophically, I'm in total agreement. I just don't think we're going to get there this first year. So baby steps, because this is a completely different way of thinking and presenting budgetary information at the budget manager level. They've never had to really defend it in that way yet. And so some of us are having a little bit harder time coming up with measures that aren't, well, these people like this stuff, right? It's not about like, it's about outcomes. And so it's a transition. Indirectly, there's a lot that doesn't apply to a student numeric measure.
Yeah, so this is new this year, as
Yes.
you made the point. So talking in terms of everything coming down to the students or the kids.
Yeah, I think part of what's behind my question too is like something that costs $1 million and reaches 36,000 kids might feel differently than $1 million that impacts 5,000 kids. You know, and
Exactly.
I was just like, I think that this is a lot of the usefulness or not usefulness. I think turns on whether it's essentially you can make a comparison across the different rows.
Yes.
And if the denominator is always moving around, my worry is it would limit the extent to which we could actually make those comparisons. I'm also open to being wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong, but I think that there's going to be two things to look at. When you compare the direct student measures, you can prioritize those and go with the ones that give you the biggest bang for your buck. And then when the ones that are directly tied to adults, do the same thing. But it's hard to take, like the HR software license, for example, is a huge,
We
big
really
investment.
need to move on.
Okay.
We really need
Sorry.
to move on.
Last time they invite that guy.
That's right, it is, actually. But the point that you made though about the number of kids, you know,
Yeah.
but the equity piece doesn't mean that it's because it affects the most people has the highest value.
Yeah, and I'm happy to
Equity
send.
would mean, that's just what my concern is, but and you guys have been working on this.
I'm happy to send follow-up questions off.
Yeah,
too.
if
I
that would
appreciate
be,
having
that would be good.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, this is great. This is very exciting, good stuff. Mike.
All I was going to note, it was kind of inspired by President Lindy's questions. First of all, I think this is awesome that we're engaging in this process. But second of all, the other issue to me, just keeping it on the student spend, is that different students cost different amounts of money. So certain amount of money we're going to spend, and it's going to look really high for 5 students, but that's the way it has to be. So I don't know if, I mean, I know that's being taken into account, but when you were talking about like $1 million for 36,000, $1 million for 5, there might be $1 million for 100 at times, and that's okay because they need it. So that was, I just wanted to add that.
Right, so it's based on the outcome,
Right.
yes.
Cool.
Jen, do you have some more?
Nope.
Okay. I would just like to emphasize those community dates and also emphasize the fact that this is still a living document, that you're working with the new superintendent, but in these next 30, 60 days or so, when the community is coming, they can still have input and impact
Yes.
in what we're doing, and the board can still have input and impact since we haven't seen yet some of this great work that's been done. So it's a living document that will be passed by June 30th, and we will not have an extension. Is that what we're committing ourselves to?
That's my hope, yes.
That's what we're committing to. We don't want to live through like we did the last few years. Thank goodness. Appreciate it. Let's get to our guests from Preschool Promise. I think that's where we are right now. And this is really a status update. We miss seeing you, but we uninvited you just because we had so many other things that were happening, and you give us such great reports anyway. So if you can take the place, and while the director or executive director is doing that, while Shara's going there, just a quick thing on number 6, levy discussion. It's the hope today that this committee will recommend what kind of levy.
Yep.
And to send that, it's my understanding the last time we talked, there was interest in everything except the normal one that we do, but it was going to be either that 10-year or was it a continuing? And everybody knows where I am about continuing. Since in 15 years I've been on the board, the only one that's failed has been a continuing. So do we have any kind of consensus or majority to forward this to the board?
I have a slide that I thought we were going to
do.
Okay.
But just right now, do you have any particular opinions carried over from last time, 10-year?
Yeah, I'm fine with 10-year.
Okay, Jen, we're going to give you the time to do that after we get, because our guests will probably have other things to do. So they just sat through our really internal stuff, and we appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the invitation back. It's good to see everyone again. Would you like me to start with the presentation that we sent over the slide deck, or addressing the specific agenda items that are listed here?
I think if we can start with the specific agenda items, that would be great, and then do the presentation, unless it somehow gets handled better the other way.
Absolutely. So in terms
Thank you.
of proposed agreement revisions to the master agreement, we have a working committee of our board that was appointed in September of last year that has met and done some high-level kind of concept ideas of potential revisions and renegotiation of the master agreement. Our legal counsel, Jacob Purcell with Manley Burke, has sent that over to your legal counsel to do kind of the first read and get the negotiation process started, knowing that we need to prioritize by June 30th, that we will come to an agreement, and we anticipate joint board meetings to do that and to reach that. And that is initially kind of just conceptually, as we talked about walking through the process and how we would do it, we would send everything over and get the process started.
Thank you. And the master agreement that is in existence is up. So we must do this.
We must.
Okay.
We must. We must. And I think in the shared vision resolution that we passed prior to the levy renewal, we identified that the time would be now, and that would be done in accordance with the principles that were agreed upon in that vision resolution. You will also see a special call out in there in the special education assessments. We have seen among our community providers that the greatest need that we have is an outgrowth of what we saw in the Ohio Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education report last October on mental health and social emotional learning and special needs. That's an area that has been a particular focus for us, and we really included in master agreement revisions. I have to say thank you, as always, to Vera Brooks and her department, who is looking to get us data on what is happening with our special needs assessments with community providers and CPS, so that we can track what's being done and try to work on, if needed, a quality improvement process for that as well. In terms of our budget development status, we did a first read of our budget with our Finance and Audit Committee on Thursday. The next step for that is that they will review it again based on their feedback. It will then go to the board for an initial read in May at their Board of Managers meeting. We, of course, would love to participate in the public hearing as well at the end of May, as we've done in the past, to make sure, because it is a combined budget. Idea. And that's normally what we do, so that people can have comment on Preschool Promise budget, so that we don't have to hold our own special public hearings to do that, because it is a collaborative project. And following that May meeting, we would look to final approval and endorsement by our board in June to submit it final to you for consideration. Map and listings of the student numbers and funded private projects. So we have a preliminary map that we update regularly. That normally comes in our July 15th report. We will expedite that to try to get that to you as soon as possible. What we have asked our external evaluator to do for us this year as well is to use the census data, some of which was released in March, to revise what we know are our quality gap neighborhoods, because we have been operating under the quality gap neighborhood analysis that we had at the beginning, that the RAND report did, to identify the number of children who are born in a certain locality that are eligible for preschool at 3 and 4 age, and the number of quality seats in that area. Fluctuations and changes in that have happened so much over the last 4 to 5 years. We really need that census data, and we also need the data from providers. It's just important to always remember, when we look at seat capacity and the maps of what that is, it is built on capacity, not actual, right? The actual seats fluctuate weekly, sometimes daily, based on the ability of the provider to do that. But we will make sure to have that to you as soon as possible. But always, we have the data from last year that we can share from that report. We can give you a current snapshot of what it is, but the new census data that's truly going to tell us that is forthcoming and will be submitted by that external evaluator for us as part of the report that the master agreement asks us to submit each year.
I think that would be helpful, and I think the committee would agree, certainly the policy committee would agree too, that we also have this kind of a new tool regarding attendance, if you will, and addresses and where the kids are coming from at the various sites. That really has helped us see if we have any deserts left, or where the draw is, or where we need to build. So it would be great if we can maybe, have you use that tool as well as the tool that's kind of been talked about today regarding the return on investment and what have you. But I think more collaboration in that area, and membership and recruitment and sharing, and then us trying to recruit your folks to come to our schools after they're done with kindergarten. After they're done with preschool. So that would be great if there's some interest. More places where we can intersect, I think the better.
Absolutely. And I think what you will see also as one of the things that we included in the master agreement is really a focused data session that we do at a minimum biannually, twice a year, to really sit down and look at what those numbers. Our external evaluator also did a map for us to tell us like the maximum amount of distance that any of our participants were going to preschool was 2 miles or less from their home, right? Which gives us a lot of important data. I think we invest by operation of the master agreement in a very thorough evaluation every year, and we should use that data collectively and collaboratively to determine the next steps that we have going forward. We're ready.
It would be great.
We're ready.
Good.
Mind if I make just a comment?
Please.
So, on Tuesday, we had Tuesday, the CPP Finance and Audit team, where the draft budget was presented. And so both organizations have expanded enough that we are now going to be beyond the $15 million set aside for the levy. And so we're going to be dipping into the prior cash carryover. And we'll sometime very soon, Kevin and Hector need to get together and do that analysis, but to project out how quickly we're going to chew through that cash balance moving forward. And so we can make some decisions about financing the expansion.
Well, these are incredibly critical times, not only because of our transition, but also we've got the 5-year agreement up, and we've got a SORTA agreement that we have to start to negotiate. So I would imagine our incoming superintendent is incoming possibly at the most, I won't say difficult, but challenging, because we all are going to work all of this out. But there's really is an opportunity. It's strange how actually there are some real new starts happening at the same time, and I think we should embrace that as best we can.
And we're going to try to make it as easy as possible with Preschool Promise. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the first slide.
Presentation, we're ready.
We do that by our dashboard, and I will say, just building on what Jen said, our board will be doing for the first time in 4.5 years strategic planning in April. And so our budget is very preliminary until that strategic planning process generates what we know are going to be our final outcomes and kind of our outlook. You will see from our dashboard, we're on target for just about everything. We have one outlier, one yellow, which, gives me a little heart palpitation. Our yellow is our professional development, and that is, we know in a non-biennium year that many providers are using their professional development times to sustain their business and other things that are not necessarily OCRA approved. So that's been a slowdown in what our professional development numbers are. I am pleased to say these are the numbers as of the end of February. Is that correct, Hector? Can't see the footnote on there. But you will see the numbers are increasing, and actual students that have been improved and enroll up to 828. We're almost back to pre-pandemic numbers. And as of last Friday, we had over 900 students approved and more than 1,140 families that we have touched through Preschool Promise to get them engaged in that application process. There's also been a significant improvement in our supporting preschool transition numbers. We have committed to doing preschool transition activities, and that means what do we do to help our preschoolers get to kindergarten? And so we have a great kindergarten readiness fair that we did. We had providers, and CPS was there to come to talk to parents about getting enrolled, and we're doing that both in person, and we've also done it virtually to make our parents available. Targeted mailing, reach out to those parents because preschool is what was needed, but it doesn't pay off if we don't get you to kindergarten. Right. We're also proud of the number of high quality seats we're creating. We're on track for that. Goal is 200 for this year and 187 so far. Also pleased with the Teacher Promise Grant numbers that have exceeded our goal. And those are the stipends that we offer for retention purposes to keep high quality teachers and high quality sites, and then they are at the community locations. We're also pleased to see the growth of the Leading Men Fellowship that we know will have young Black men who are interested in early childhood education at both CPS sites and community provider sites, getting them into the pipeline and focusing on literacy efforts for the children there. The only other thing I would also highlight is that we're very thankful for the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, who made a $100,000 grant to the Cincinnati Preschool Promise to help our community providers kind of build their business acumen and skills. So while they're educators, they're also working on how to do outreach and promotion and recruit students, make sure they are maintaining their business practices in a way that allow them to access the stabilization grants so that they don't operate at a loss. Important to maintaining high quality in that. We've had very few closures of community provider sites, 3 temporary closures and 2 permanent provider closures. One of those permanent closures of sites has moved out of the district. You'll also see on the next slide just some general information for overview of what's happening in the Early Learning Network in terms of step up to quality, and also the steps that we're taking to address the article I'm sure that everyone saw of a Tennessee study done by Vanderbilt that talked about the harm of preschool education. So we were addressing that immediately with some tactics and some strategies and how we'll be addressing that to bring out the truth and the facts and what we've learned rather than the rhetoric that might be around investments in early childhood education.
Politically motivated people with high motivations help create Preschool Promise and the national movement for preschool and early childhood. And now just the opposite spectrum has found a way to say, oh no, that's not good. And I'll bet the early group against this other group, but this other group's going to get a lot of play.
Well, I think it is. It's always shocking to people when they understand the ideals that they have require a fiscal investment, not magic. So, motivation. And that's what we have. Again, as I said, I invite questions and any feedback we have, not only at these meetings, but at any time on our presentation. Our dashboards are updated regularly and posted to our website. And we will be inviting you all to our April 26th special event. We had our pitch night winners last year were Peanut Butter and Jam to focus on music education. They will be having their end of year concert with all of the preschoolers that participated on April 26th, and we'll be inviting you to that. Pitch night winners for this year is Case Bark and a small home visitation program and focusing on social emotional learning for 20 providers in the community. So we look forward to bringing that to you.
I didn't know who was. That's great.
Yep.
Questions, comments? And to our treasurer and our legal counsel, I believe you all have at least had the initial meeting or whatever internally about the initial proposal from Preschool Promise Board regarding an agreement.
Yeah, so Dan, Vera, and I met yesterday to go over the draft and make comments.
Excellent.
Okay.
We good?
Thank you.
You did a lot very quickly. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dan's always trying to trip us.
Yeah. He wants to sue. What is ambulance chaser or something? Forgive me, but I'm there you go.
Dan, let's not go legal counsel.
All right, Ms. Vera Brooks. Oh, this is good stuff. And then Jen will do your slides for the,
Yeah,
so we've
whichever.
got that for the
However you
record
want.
as well.
Good morning,
ma'am.
everyone.
Good morning.
I was asked to do a real quick update.
Yeah, she had less than 10 hours to prepare. So.
Yes. So it's a good thing that I have great team members. I do want to shout out to Miss Erin because a lot of
Excellent.
what you're going to see is her assistance helping me make it look beautiful
Fantastic.
and putting the data in place. So I did want to share with you just where our growth is by our run charts through our QI projects. So we have looked at it through registration enrollment. So these are students are in seats, but as you know, we continually enroll all year, so we are still enrolling for this year. So there is a gap of around 20 to 30 that are in process of this number. And you'll see that when what one of my needs or wants is. So we are currently registered or enrolled across all our funding sources at around 1,936 students. Actually in Power School, I don't have it memorized, but it is 18 or 19.
I think it's over 19.
Yeah, it's over 19. So we are closing that gap of getting kids in seats. Our ultimate goal is within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer because we do need the appropriate documentation from the families. So I did want to share that with you, along with our P4s that we will be transitioning to kindergarten next year in a CPS school. So starting in January and February, our assistant school community coordinators, who I cannot rave enough about because they are in the field serving the families and the children and the teachers, they do a returning child packet with the family. And at that time, they ask the family, where are you attending kindergarten? And they complete that documentation so a parent no longer has to re-enroll to be in kindergarten. Automatically, when our district rolls over, then they're automatically in their school. Or if they've gone through the lottery, they are automatically in that seat. So we did have a dip last year because of COVID, because we had to reduce down to 1,500 seats. But we currently have 1,222 kindergarten P4 4-year-olds ready to enter CPS kindergarten next year.
Oh, great.
So that number will appear magically after rollover occurs in July, end of July.
And there's 1,915 kids into this morning's enrollment.
In Power School. So we're closing
Super.
that gap. Next slide, please. Thank you, Rob. This is data that I've worked with Brian Sershin in the department to look at our fall ELA scores, and ours is early learning assessment. So these numbers do not include our 701 Head Starts because they take the TS Gold. So we have two different assessments going on at the same time. So this is the majority of our preschool students, and these are composite scores with the mean. And we wanted to compare when we left in 2019-20 to where we started this fall. So the blue is from fall 2019, which was pre-COVID, and then the red is our ELA in specific areas of language and literacy from this fall, 2021. Because we were in very, how do we say it? We were very nervous that we were going to have great learning loss just because of the situation over the last, I think it's been 2 years now.
Yeah.
2 years. So you can see in our phonological awareness, even though we have not made any gain, there's very little learning loss. In our communications, we did have a little bit of a dip, but we're finding that this year that has been a focus in our classrooms. So our children are seeing, with mask, not mask, and things like that, they're having that engagement, along with our vocabulary scores went up. So with that data, we're good in vocabulary. With that, so Rob, can you go to the next one?
Years.
So now with that small
it's all
bit
about
of
vocabulary.
with that small bit of data I just came at you, here's what skill we would need for continuous growth.
Uh-oh, this is the ask.
You know how I built that up.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we are looking at learning experiences and instructional materials that are connected to our adopted curriculum. And when I say adopted curriculum, I'm not only talking about the teaching strategies, creative curriculum. It's wonderful we have the cloud, but we also have some supplemental curriculums. We do Heggerty phonological awareness. We are discovering this year that we have a group of children that need the pre-Heggerty. Heggerty was a little too high level, so we are now starting to implement that pre-Heggerty to help catch the, fill that gap. So the areas that we wish to focus in are family engagement, language and literacy, phonological awareness, social and emotional learning, having children learn how to self-regulate more, and mathematics, number sense. And then with this year, we have piloted a STEM program that is being very successful in those areas. So we would like to expand that. Professional development, everyone, and I'm not just talking teachers, I'm talking paraprofessionals, student service assistants, security, everyone. Professional developments in the fundamental areas so that we can continue our coaching model that we piloted with the class observations, where we do a quick observation, but then we continue to coach through the year before we do a touchback. Facilities and space and outdoor play areas. I should have put this more up on the level. We are now looking at, since we are enrolling now for next year, we are finding that we definitely need more space on the east side. And we also are discovering, and I'm going to call on your tip, Mr. Moreski, that we are finding, since we have partnered with Performing Arts, that we are going to need a little more space in that area also. Because that's a growing, and families, as soon as we opened up and that school welcomed their arms to our kids at Ezra Charles, it has grown. So those are the areas. On the east side, as you know, we have John P. Parker, but we have a higher need on the east side due to the fact that there is a new charter going in, and we have heard that there's a possible addition of 40 preschool seats going into that charter. So we would like to address that area. Outdoor play areas. We do have some schools that still, like Taft Elementary, it does not have a play area for its preschool. It has an area they can play, but not up to the standard of Cincinnati Public Schools. So there are a few areas that we would like to upgrade. Support staff. Support staff to recruit, register, enroll, not just to put kids in seats, but our support staff actually serve the classrooms. They are in our buildings. They are serving the families. If a family at arrival comes in and says, oh, we're having difficulty with housing, they are the front line, that support staff, to then connect them with Project Connect and make sure that family's taken care of. So their role is very large, other than just filling out paperwork to enroll a child into a classroom. And then also our expansion for our community partnerships. We really want to focus in on our health and safety, our language and literacy, and our social and emotional learning. And to end, because I was told I only had 5 minutes.
I didn't tell you that.
Somebody else did.
I just have to show you our star rating chart.
Cool.
We will be adding, so you are aware, we will be adding, I'm very excited about this, Covedale next year. The reason being is Gamble was very gracious and is welcoming our co-teach classroom into their building. And since then that runs space-wise at Gamble, we are moving one of the preschool classrooms from Gamble over to Covedale. So the addition is actually the co-teaching classroom, which will be a part of, we're collaborating with student services to ensure that we have that full continuum for our children with special needs. Also, you will see application and process for CANS and Rising Star Chevy at Westwoods. They've been open, but due to COVID, they have not gotten to us, as you can relate to. All right. They have not gotten to us to finish the rating process. Okay.
Great about Cokeville.
I'm very excited about Coverdale. Principal Kip opened her arms, and I'm very grateful.
It's amazing the community knowledge. I was some weeks ago over at the Kiwanians, maybe at Westwood folks, and these are people even older than I.
And me.
And you, since you've been, like, must be, God knows, since you've been here since the 70s. That's right. Others joke, folks, from previous committee. They asked about it.
Mhm.
I mean, these two gentlemen, and one is a granddaddy or whatever, and that has a little kid, and somehow they have heard this.
Yes.
And it's so, of all the things that hit the community, and Charlie, you know this as well as certainly Vera, which is this goes into the community. It is known. You talk about an opportunity to communicate. Preschool is it. It really is. So that's great. What else, Del?
I do have, and I
Yeah,
know
show
this
us.
is the old-fashioned way, but it's hot off the press because I heard Shara mention the request for this special ed data. I will send it electronically. I just didn't have time
Hard
this morning.
copy is something.
Yeah, hard copy or something.
God, see, I'm telling you.
We all got it until someone says, watch your step.
I've been watching too much Better Calls.
So what I was able to receive to address the question about the students with disabilities is I reached out to Student Services. So this data is actually coming from CPS Student Service Department. And they went back, I asked them to go back to 2016, which was the beginning of our wonderful collaboration with Fiscal Promise. And this will show HMG has helped me grow. And then a parent request. Now you'll see at the top, Team ATB. In 2016-17, there were only 2 teams funded through Preschool Expansion dollars to address this need. In 17-18, I wasn't around then. Well, I was around, but not around.
Jen was.
Jen was, yeah. That's when the 3rd team was added. So that's why you see that going from 2 teams to 3 teams. And the way the process occurs is the information a private provider might have a need or they have a concern, they would have the parent then make the referral to the district. The parent has to make the referral unless it's through the Help Me Grow. So that's where you're seeing these numbers over the years, by month, by parent agency, and then total. So at the bottom, like for 16-17, in August, through Help Me Grow, there were 32 referrals, but through a parent or a provider, there was 21 referrals. So 53 students were served at that time. And this could be at different levels. And I will get this to you electronically, I promise.
And then the totals literally are the totals for each year at the
Yes,
end.
yes. And of course, 21-22 is incomplete
Wow.
because we're still in 21-22. But you can see the referrals, just we didn't have them, they didn't have it by month yet.
Jen?
Team C, is that the one that's is targeted for the levy set aside, the special cost center that we did for the preschool expansion?
All these teams service.
All kids, but there was a specific team that we added to the budget as a result of the preschool expansion. That's Team C.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are all 3 of these teams service private providers.
Oh,
They call them, it's one team, but they break it out. They want to put people's names on it. They have Team Lobby, it's, a group
Yeah.
of people.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is good because this is one of the things we all want to talk about, right?
Mhm.
It's just
It
for
is.
the assessment piece. So that's
And
great.
if anyone needs it, I just didn't want to print it because this is a public
No.
forum. We do have a list of all the names and ID numbers and things like that.
Think about that.
Yeah. That was a data share I didn't want to do
Right.
publicly. Okay.
Can I ask one
Jen,
quick question?
sure.
Not about this, but recently I was asked about how many preschool classrooms that we have.
136.
I was close. Thank you.
43 sites.
May I?
Please.
Okay. Jennifer, I think I know where you were headed, and I agree with you. The way she said it, before the preschool expansion, there were only 2 teams worth of people. And after preschool expansion, you generate that third team, which is partial.
Right.
So I think I agree with you
Gotcha.
that third team, even though they're all together,
Yeah.
was the one that is being funded through preschool expansion.
Right, and we charge that to a special cost center that we track all the levy set aside to spend to.
Thank you.
Is that,
I wasn't around.
That was
so.
before.
That was before me.
Yes.
But again, not before.
Apparently
Jen.
you and Jen were here, Hector.
Please.
I think it is, thank you so much, Vera, for getting this data, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion in it. I really hope that when we sit down and look at what this is, rather than have disaggregated student data numbers, but that we be able to articulate what these services are that are being provided in a way that providers and parents understand and can see the benefits and the ROI on this investment, because I think that is the only thing that's going to address what many have raised to us as a concern.
And and Charlie, to answer your question, they have collected that. So we do have
Great.
the preliminary data of that. I just didn't, it has private information.
Right,
on it.
and to not talk about it necessarily in our language as educators and administrators, but in a language and have it translated and work with our marketing team so that it's clear to the public and the parents and the providers the value and the ROI.
Well, you won't find anybody here that doesn't think we can all do a great job eventually in communication, and it needs to be done in a language that people can understand, not the language that we speak, the educanese, and that's particularly true for special services and whatever. So, but at least the data, the information's there, and you've created a great platform from which the discussion can occur.
Okay.
Fantastic. All good news. Great news. Yes, sir.
If I may, I'm not want to be personal in these meetings, but it's difficult not to be having a young person that lives with me who is rapidly approaching preschool age, which seems strange to me. I'd just like to share, it just struck me as I was listening to this and taking in all the information professionally. And personally, my wife and I have been having a lot of discussions about where James will go to preschool. He's currently at New Horizons in Evanston, which is one of the very first preschool promise sites. And Hayes Porter is where he's going to go to school because it's our neighborhood school, and that's where we believe you should send your child. And in all of the discussions about where James will go to preschool, not one time ever do we have to talk about as a family which one is better. And I think that's a notable thing. It is not normal. We are privileged people. And not everybody, most people, quite frankly, are not in this city. And the fact that everybody can have those same conversations if they so choose without ever having to discuss whether or not they're going to be at a quality preschool, I think is extraordinarily significant. And I just kind of wanted to, kept going through my mind. I could not say something. So to, Chara and Hector and the whole team, and certainly Vera and Jen and everybody on our team, it's unique and it's noted. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great investment by the taxpayers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a great comment. Levy, you have your slides regarding levy?
Yep.
I think we want to see it to be reassured that we're recommending the right thing. So educate us a little bit, but this will be our third time on this issue.
Yes.
As a committee. And we do want to take action and try to make a recommendation and have the board vote prior to our new superintendent having to come in her first meeting and say to the taxpayers and the voters, hi, I think we need a renewal. And here I am. So it needs to be identified with us.
Right. So this levy, which was originally enacted as new money, was in 2008. So this will be the third renewal, $51.5 million levy. Fixed sum levy, and I put on here we're proposing the renewal of the 10-year, from 5 years to 10. What I've been witnessing over the last decade or so is levy fatigue, both on the voters and on those that support the levies, but because the public doesn't always understand that a renewal is a renewal. They always think we're just coming back every year for more money. So we have 3 fixed on levies that are on renewal cycles. And I'm giving you the history. I'm sorry, I'll just skip over this. So the timeline, there's 2 resolutions that have to be passed. The first one, we're hoping to put forth on April 25th just to address what Chair Bolton was saying about the new superintendent coming in. Typically, we do that somewhere in May, but we can do that April 25th to pass the first one, and all that is you're declaring the need for the renewal levy. It's required to be passed at least 100 days before election, so the deadline to pass it is July 31st. And then the second resolution certifies the ballot language that the Hamilton County Auditor puts out there. That has to be done at least 90 days prior to the election, so that deadline's August 10th. Going to say something?
I'm just going to make sure that the president, that Ben is aware of those dates. So just make sure he gets those. I'm sure he already has, but
It's on. You remember the document that I created, all the financial transactions that
It's
have to
all
happen?
there.
It's on there. Yeah, and don't worry, I won't let you miss it. So, and then I just put a little bit of election history. I was curious as to see what our passage rates were the last couple of levies. And so the last one we had was the one that helped support the preschool expansion. It was issue number 17 in 2020. That was the first renewal, and it passed at a 69.6% passage rate. And then on issue 12 is the $65 million, and that's the one where we switched from a 5-year to a 10-year. That was a first ever opportunity or attempt, and that was passed at a 71.8% support rate. So that was excellent. Now, there is one concern. There's a House Bill 140 that is proposing, and I think this is the 3rd or 4th time they've done this over the years, to try to change the ballot language. We all think it's more confusing to the taxpayer, but I asked Dan here to address that, and I don't know when it would be applied.
and that refers to item 10 on the agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so we've taken a look at how the House bill is, in terms of status. It's passed the House on April 22nd, referred to Senate Ways and Means. Their next meeting is on 4/28, so about 2 weeks from now. The basic intent of the bill, or the most important change, would be that in the ballot language, going forward, this bill would require that the levy be described both in terms of millage, which is sort of the traditional way of describing a levy, and then specifically in the amount per $100,000 of the county auditor's appraised value, which is a little bit of a different way of doing. This bill seems to have more support than previous versions. It seems, in my view, I think this bill probably is actually make things a little. So I think I only say that in terms of it's probably got a higher chance of prior efforts. If passed, it would be effective to any election that occurs 100 days after its effective date. So generally, the effective date would be like 60 days after passage, after the governor signs, and then if the election falls within 100 days of that, it could be. They would have to move very, very quickly, I think, and they may even be beyond. I don't expect it to apply to them, but we'll be watching it and working with Dinsmore and Scholl is typically who assists us with our public. Glad to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
So, quick question on that, Dan. Would it have to be enacted in time for whatever language that would then be placed onto the ballot, or for the votes?
The language from the bill says that it applies to any election that occurs 100 days within or not sooner than 100 days after. So I think
it would have to be in that second resolution that we passed by August 10th if it was going to impact this levy.
But again, generally the effective date is not until 60 days. Bill is passed. So I think it's unlikely that it's going to apply in November. But we'll be watching.
Okay.
We'll absolutely, and Brenda does this for school districts and municipalities. Brenda Weimer is all over, so they are definitely watching.
Zoronsky. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Yes.
Before we leave the levy discussion.
Yeah, please.
Whenever you're
Ready? Go for it.
Just a couple questions. I have to assume that these are all things you all have already done, thought about, talked about.
Don't do
written
that.
towards this. But have you, Jen, been talking with the incoming superintendent about how this levy plays into our overall financial picture?
Not specifically. We just haven't gotten there to that level of detail on the revenue side yet.
Yeah, I find it hard to imagine a scenario where she doesn't think renewing this funding source is important. And I just want to check that we've talked with her about, I don't want her to feel boxed in on something one way or the other. So that was one question. And the other one's related to this. Just when we've been able to, I see the levy support numbers. I think that's true. I think, often part of what's helped us get levies passed is we have a really strong and diverse political coalition that wants to support those. So have there been conversations with things like the local Democratic Party or CFT or CDC about the levy plan yet at all?
I think the only conversations that have taken place so far outside of the system, since the board has not acted, has been with the person that usually in the company that has helped run or direct. There's been conversations with that person representing the groups that have been supportive.
My preference would be like, I'm not opposed to this timeline at all, but
Right.
I would like whatever timeline we use, I'd like it to feel and be clear to everybody that, interim soup supports, incoming soup supports, broad and diverse political coalition
Sounds
supports, so that we are all on a train together, and that there's not any getting out in front of one.
Yes, I think it would still behoove us to get this passed as in the first resolution rather than necessarily gear up any additional political support for it. But we're happy to do that. I just feel I feel strongly, it's just one board member, the new superintendent's first action should not be to ask for a renewal. I think it is, you're right, it's totally inconceivable. And I would have great worried thoughts if she came in and said, oh, we don't really need annually $55 million. So that's my first decision. We're not going to do it.
She could reasonably say,
we're moving on.
We want instead of 55, we want 50. Or instead of 55, we want 75.
What a great way to start, too, with a board that has, and a community that has developed this, passed this, and with high percentage points. Of course, I have a personal affection for this particular levy because it was my first, and it only passed by 4-3, and it only passed because it was the Clinton-Obama primary. It's the only reason. Because if we even go back further, a lot of these high percentages that you're seeing in the last 15 years, the previous 15 years, that was not happening.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of ride this horse, but I think you're right that it'd be great to get the incoming superintendent's views on this and have her be aware of it. I don't.
Well, she might be watching us today.
Well, good. Hi.
She did try to call me in the middle of that meeting, but I couldn't hear her. So
yeah. I haven't gotten a text message, but that's very possible.
Yeah. So
channel in if you want to not do the levy.
She had a medical thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She might be.
Good.
Yeah, so
But
I have meetings with her
do
next week.
catch her
I'll
up.
confirm, but
That'd be great.
I am like 9% that either superintendent would not oppose this.
I think that's right.
Well, last clarifying question.
Sure.
It just on the resolution that would happen on the 25th, that would still leave the new superintendent and us room to maneuver on exactly how much and what term levy would be, or would it lock in the amount?
We'll defer to Jen and to Dan. I know there are at least two more actions that have to take place after we do this.
It will lock you in
To the
because
amount.
in order to change the value, you change the type of levy that it is. So it's no longer renewal if you increase it.
Yeah.
And we did talk about whether, when I presented all the
decrease.
different
You did.
options, we talked about whether one of the options is to do a substitute and an increase. But given the state of the economy and the fact that we have all these ESSER funds,
not
we didn't
happening.
think that was wise.
Yeah, I just could be a substitute and a decrease. I think is the thing that like I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying that I don't want to make that decision for the next superintendent or
Well,
absent a conversation with some of our political
It would be based
stakeholders.
upon her advice. The decision is made by the board. So that's the thing that has to be understood. But I think, yeah, after we have if you want to talk to her and share some of these thoughts,
I'd be happy to do
that'd
that.
be great.
It would be against my advice. My
Exactly.
financial guidance would be not to reduce it at this time.
But
Given the 5-year forecast,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the unfortunately the guiding North Star is that 5-year forecast. And that's why I still think that's what I wanted to say about the budget, that it's still an active effort from a standpoint that you add stuff and you can cut stuff still.
Yeah.
And you can say, listen, we might want to go back a couple of years to that total and not say you're going to get an automatic increase. So I think that is all part of that living document kind of stuff. And I think you're right to say it'd be great to be able to reduce or change or whatever, but I think we're going on Jen's advice regarding the amount. And I think the continuing is kind of a non-starter, but please share.
Well, continue is my preference, but
Of course it is.
I have
3 times I can think of now, 3 levies.
My proposal is a 10-year.
Thank you. Dan?
There's a difference between continuing and a 10-year also in terms of what you can call it. 10-year, you can make it a 10-year and still call it a renewal. A continuing, I believe you have to refer to it as a. So changes, that's the additional change.
In November, we have to have this passed. Okay, cool. Good discussion. We have already had sort of the yellow bus follow-up or update at our board meeting on Monday. Appreciate that. We know that our folks in transportation have been working and they are evolving a yellow bus proposal, but what is still kind of in the mix, as I understand it, is an effort that we have to negotiate with SORTA. Is that correct? A new contract. And more particularly, we have to have our own district proposal before we enter that negotiations. Not proposing, we're not necessarily, we haven't seen a proposal regarding Metro yet from the administration. I've sat through all of them, so it's not been a proposal, but they've been keeping us abreast. Do we know, Dan, and if indeed Metro has gotten back all of the information that we requested? I heard on Monday that they had not, and there were somewhat, I won't say discrepancies, but there were ways that we could validate the information about this year. That Connie was able to kind of validate the numbers this year specifically, but going back, especially as it pertained to ridership and unique ridership and some of the other stuff that we had to make a public records request for.
So they didn't send anything additional to me. Connie's been having direct discussions
Yes.
with them at this point, and I think she reported on Monday that she hadn't gotten everything back, but expected to this week.
Yeah.
Generally, she's followed up with me when she needs us to do a public records request, and she hasn't followed up. So I expect that she has, but I haven't heard otherwise. I'll say that.
And I know that the Metro SORTA folks need us to sign for their own compliance, things that we have not signed.
They've asked us.
Yes, and they believe that we should, and we have to make that decision. But this is a full-blown negotiations. This is not just starting another or having another addendum, as you described it to us back in August. This is a new contract.
I mean, the former agreement contemplated, while it still left routing decisions to Metro, it contemplated that there would be those, lack of a better, dedicated extra routes, right? So, I mean, I don't think we should just do an addendum. I think we should understand exactly what our needs are. They should understand that, and what they're able to provide. That be documented.
So not necessarily an assignment, but the committee kind of cool with the idea. We asked the administration to proceed with a metro kind of plan as best possible, so that we are able to get something happening. I think that makes sense. The other piece of it is, I think that we again, and it comes up in board meetings often, the need for us to politically communicate to the sort of board our concerns and our interests, but also I think we should, based upon what the administration brings forward, we are now apparently assuming 7th and 8th graders that used to be on Metro. So that's some thousands of kids. And also the charter children are not allowed to have any more than one transfer beginning this next school year by state law. So there's that regarding, and so there's room here, I would think, for some sort of settlement and some sort of direction after we see what the administration is proposing for Metro, sort of. I mean, that would be you all that would be negotiating with them, correct? I mean, it's legal counsel and their legal counsel and our transportation folks.
We don't have in-house legal counsel, but yes.
Do you know who they are, who their
Sure.
outside
Tony
is?
Osterlander.
Okay. And that would need to be in place. What's the timeline? That, in sometime during the summer, we're certainly not going to be waiting until August like we got hit with before. We can't do that. Yes, sir.
I imagine that to be even sooner than that, which maybe like yesterday.
Yeah.
So, which leads into my question, and it's really two different questions. Choose your own adventure. Pick the quickest and easiest one to answer, because they'll both get to my same point, I think. One is, what do they have? Chair Bolton alluded to something we haven't signed. So either what do they have that we haven't signed, or two, are we waiting to sign it until we know what our proposal is?
I think they're referring to the annual addendum. It's
So
kind of
it's
like
part
the
two, okay.
annual informal contract of pricing and stuff like that. I think it's 2 years.
Well, it's a one-pager. I think we signed last year. This year's it's a one-pager that says, this is the number of passes and this is the cost per pass. That's literally all it says. I think the board's objection, if I can characterize, I think the board's objection to our signing was that it didn't contemplate that there would be any extra routes.
Right.
I think that was why we were directed.
Extra as in XTRA,
Yes.
our extra routes,
Yes.
Correct.
which there won't be. We know that.
There
right?
wasn't this year, but
Well,
that was
I'm
the
not
objection.
assuming that. I am not assuming that they can shirk their responsibility to our kids while they're reinventing Metro and expanding other services, or the manpower and bus driving is getting better nationwide. So I'm not assuming. I'm not going to negotiate with ourselves, but I am curious to see what the administration can bring forward, because we have now assumed an awful lot more than we had assumed that they were having to do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a 60-40%. I can't remember which is the 60 or which is the 40, but according to Connie, there was 40% of the students, they weren't even having to do any longer, and that was that's not even just that's about transfers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even about counting in the numbers of 7th and 8th graders we've removed. So we've compromised greatly, and the schools just feel strongly that we got to get the children to school in a timely manner. And the route thing is different. The healthy starts is different now too. That was impacting their decision because they were having to do the 9:45 or something. So it's a completely different ballgame. Sir.
And so in light of that, and I would just say, and I've said this before in the bigger meetings, so I just want to keep saying it. I for one, my goal, I think all of our goals is to get the kids to school at healthy time as possible, get them home, etc. I, for one, I am not interested in fighting with Metro anymore about it.
Right.
So, and I think it'll be easier to take a hardline position for me when I see what the proposal is that comes, because I'm past it. I was there for a minute, I think, but I'm past it. And I will say, I do this often, but I'll point a I do not think the extra hours have a snowball's chance of coming back. And I love it, and that's why we're going to get to a good place, because we can give good guidance. I don't.
I doubt that they do, because their business plan last year did not include us. And they're evolving that business plan that they threw at us. We got in that position because we dropped the ball in supervising and overseeing the administration. And that was a problem. So I just think it's a new ballgame.
Yeah.
And let's
see
what we can do.
It is. You're right. Cool.
But yeah, I'm not interested in suing. Okay.
Yep.
And now we'll attribute most of these extra minutes that we're going to President Lindy. But we want to get through our treasurer's goals.
Well,
Are you sharing those with us today?
yes, I am. So here's.
We don't have to react yet, but we
Yeah.
just want to get
Give me
it
some
as
feedback,
public
but-
record.
So, you can pull that back up if you don't mind, Rob. So the next thing on the agenda was the growth.
She's got new graphics.
It's fancy, isn't it?
It's fancy.
Matches our new paint.
So you asked me to consider funding possibilities, and so what I gave you is a summary of the facility needs. Here's a list of all the facility needs. They're all funded by, we were able to arrange it by ESSER to the tune of $41 million of the 300 and something million. Now, keep in mind, there is a rule under the new ESSER, the third ESSER, that says X% has to be spent on learning loss, so you can't use your ESSER funds just on facilities. So we'll make sure that we stay in compliance with that. Then was us to investigate the possibility of purchasing or obtaining our own buses. And we have two choices, either purchase or, and then I did verify with Brenda Weimer at Dinsmore that borrowing against for buses is exempt from the debt limitation. We do have about $7.5 million of debt room based on our current valuation, but buses are exempt from that limitation, so we don't have to worry about that. So if you look to the next slide. So two options, if you want to get buses, you can either buy them or lease them.
And this is great.
If you buy them, you can do a PI levy, which probably don't want to do that. But what that does is it increases your revenue. It does not put strain on your operating budget, your operating funds.
Gotcha.
If you borrow the money, you'll pay lower interest than in a lease, but your annual debt payments will also put a strain on your operating budget. We're already struggling with that. So you're going to add debt payments to that. Or you can just purchase right out of your operating funds, which will put a huge strain on your operating budget, depending on how many buses you want to buy.
What's a bus cost?
About $90,000. And I don't know how many buses we're talking about, so I didn't cost it out.
I think Connie's waiting to see what the numbers are out of the athletic and whatever group that is.
All right, so
I've heard 10 to 15. I think
10 to
that's
15, okay. And there is a 6 months backlog on order. So the other option is to lease it, which you'll pay a little bit higher interest rate, but it's a much simpler financial tool to do. Doing a lease is much faster and simpler and easier than to issue debt or a levy, because you can only do levies at certain times of the year, right? So we could act faster on a lease, but you'll pay a little bit more in interest, and then that also puts a strain on your operating budget because you have to make those annual lease payments. So that was the history, and once I get some more information from Connie, I'll update you on dollars.
Cool.
The last page. I'm sorry, was there a question?
I just want a quick question before we move past it. With the purchasing versus leasing, is there also the discussion of the long-term cost of owning and maintaining versus what servicing would be done through leasing?
Yeah, so we could, because you do, if you're owning them, then you're responsible for all the maintenance. Lease them, depending on how you structure the lease, right? So we could look at those options as we move forward. I just didn't know what the scope of the size was.
Right.
And so that would make a difference as well.
Sure.
So that's a very good point. And you also, you're taking on staff members and their benefits and their training and all kinds of stuff. So it's just something to consider. And then the last page is just a draft version of goals for next year based on conversations that we had during evaluation presentation, and some feedback I've gotten from other places, or just things that I want to work on. But 5 major goals, just to refine our whole budget equity process than what we did today or this year. Standardizing the financial impact tool, and what I want to do is that for every contract that we put in the treasurer's report, the measures of success are going to be on that treasurer's report before you decide to approve or not. I want to get us into the everyday thought of how are we going to measure success on every vendor contract we put forward.
And it's good that you have this tool or whatever as well.
And then what we're
doing,
doing,
because I know it's been a priority of yours for at least 4 years.
at least. And then what we're trying to do is work with PowerSchool to come up with a way to electronically track it that's attached to our financial system, and then we can report on it instead of doing manual reporting.
Unless we change from PowerSchool.
The RFP is about SIS. We are not moving away from financial right now.
Okay,
At
good.
least not in my lifetime.
I hear you. We did that once.
I'm going to do that once.
Yeah.
And then under financial engagement, this is one of the Kareem's recommendations, was the area of growth. And so I've talked some to Superintendent Wright about it. And we actually had a really nice session at the conference around, they called it Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner. And it was funny because half the people in the room didn't get the movie reference.
So sad. So sad.
I love it.
I know. But so they're absolutely right, and I've been trying to do this. I need more support from the Public Affairs Communications Department.
As do we all.
Right. So we talked to, so Ironette and I are having those conversations. I did share with you like a draft of the public dashboard in my evaluation thing. We're going to formalize that and announce it soon. We're adopting 2 new quality improvement processes, like the one we just shared with you that saved us so much money. We're focusing on paying our invoices faster and then reducing the amount of paycheck errors. So an analysis that I did several years ago was that 90% of the errors on a paycheck occur from outside the payroll department. And so those are processes that we're trying to refine and improve upon so that we're accurate the first time out in a timely manner. And then the 5th one is all about my succession planning and creating that treasure pipeline. So continuing with the executive coaching, setting more people to impact you by process improvement training, working on the next level of leadership at the finance department on their career plans and helping them develop those, and then getting a little bit more intentional about sending people into a networking environment. So I spent a lot of time at the conference helping Kim get connected to other people in the treasure world across the state and in the county.
Suggestions, questions, comments, gentlemen?
And I'm looking for ideas of other projects.
I would say you need to put the levy somewhere. And talking in terms of engagement, I think it would be really cool.
Wait a minute, are you talking about levy engagement, or are you talking
I'm talking about engagement generally?
Okay.
But I think that the passing the levy needs to be somewhere. It could be under any number of those as a bullet. You have to assume responsibility as just like the superintendent does. And the
I
board
get
does.
crushed if we don't pass the levy?
Hell yes.
Okay.
But no, I think, let's face it, you're going to be spending a whole bunch of time passing that levy.
Yes.
But to that point, my issue, I think it would be really cool, and I think a good idea to have you and the superintendent make mutual appearances.
Yes. As we did.
Into the public, as we have done before.
Right.
That is so impressive when you see the superintendent and the treasurer go community-wide, different places, and here's the financial part of the house, and here's the instructional and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think if you show that teamwork, I think that makes a great impression. So I would like to see part of that engagement, and then also to have the people be able to tell you what they're thinking. I watched a really nice thing last night from Carson School, which is doing a really good job of reaching out and rebuilding their culture. It was delightful. But I do think that teamwork would be good for her, good for you, but more importantly, good for the district's image as we evolve.
Okay. Thank you.
The other stuff I think is really good, especially that UI stuff. My goodness. Go save another, bajillion. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When does this get finalized?
The goals,
It hasn't been.
Oh, I was just going when it does.
last year they were finalized in August, so based on feedback from you all, I will bring them back to Finance Committee next month for like a final blessing, I guess.
Yeah.
Then they'll get adopted through the minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I think you'll add, I'm assuming, numbers to them.
Yeah, yes.
Great. I think it's like broad categories. I think they look great. I was just excited to review the targets too.
Yeah.
Hold to that return on investment.
Yep.
If we're gonna talk the talk, we gotta walk the walk, right?
Absolutely. Who else? Oh, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, Connie said she does have some.
Great. From the hospital. I love it.
Well, it might be a little hard to wear everything. Okay.
Did you want me to talk?
Oh, dear God. There she is.
I'm here.
Okay, great. You have some stuff to add, Rob said?
Yeah, just quickly. So we were looking at 10 buses, which it would mean, I think we were also budgeting for 12 drivers. We'd need to have subs, and they would need CDL licenses. And then we were also looking at providing a secure place to keep these buses. So we were looking at building a fence to secure them at night over at Jacobs. Excuse the background noise, please. And then we were also, I'm sorry about that. And as I mentioned, we were looking at 10 full-size yellow buses. And then also a maintenance worker to maintain these buses, make sure that we stay in compliance with state regulations. So those were the items we were going to include.
Thank you. Anything else? You heard us talk a little bit about we're checking into that sort of metro proposal, and that would be great to hear back from you. And we know that the yellow bus was actually much more urgent. The timeline is more crucial or close. We appreciate you prioritizing it. Have you received all the information yet that you needed from Metro or that we requested?
We're supposed to get that at the next meeting, which is on Friday.
Okay.
And then we'll be able to share what we've learned from those reports at the next time I present at whenever you want me to present.
Sure. Well, that's great. And we really appreciate you prioritizing this meeting in light of everything else is happening today, and wish your mom the best.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anything we haven't? I'm sorry we went over, but as I said, I'm putting that in the Ben Lindy bank right
Everything
now.
bad's my fault.
Absolutely.
It
You're
is.
the president. You got the center seat,
Always
babe. So
is.
this is what happened. But we appreciate you being here and asking good stuff. And really appreciate you finding that tool.
Sure.
Measurement and assessment and stuff.
I'll give my plug on the Georgetown course later because I know we're short on time, but highly recommend.
We're overtime, so no longer short, but we're I hope done. General Counsel, you have anything, but just that we have to start worrying about the Metro thing and also the preschool thing.
Levy resolution.
And the levy resolution. Great.
Sent to Brenda already.
Excellent. Anybody else in the room need anything? My understanding, we have nobody making a statement. Those are great, wonderful, great, good quality stuff. And
Thanks,
we
y'all.
appreciate everybody doing that. And Dan, thanks for coming for this today, as well as
Dan.
the remarkable policy committee. And Ms. Davis, you got all the notes? Yeah. Good for you. It'll be a book.
On notes.